Joe Biden set to end America's longest war, withdrawing all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th. That deadline in time for the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks planned from there. Our Dave Keating is standing by in Brussels with reaction from NATO. The U.S. president also confronting Vladimir Putin. Biden telling the Russian president to scale back its military buildup on the border with Ukraine, suggesting the two leaders hold their first summit in person. A report from the front lines of the simmering conflict on the way. And with 30% of its population already vaccinated, Serbia is now starting to give vaccines to the homeless. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good to have you with us. I'm Jeannie Godula. First, U.S. President Joe Biden today is due to announce the country's full withdrawal from Afghanistan, and this by September 11th. That, of course, is a highly symbolic date for the United States, as this year marks the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks that were coordinated from Afghanistan. Last year, the Trump administration made a deal with the Taliban that all U.S. troops would be gone by May in exchange for a promise that the group would not support al-Qaeda or other foreign militants. Now, Biden's Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Brussels today for talks with NATO. He says the alliance would work together with the U.S. to leave Afghanistan together.
After the United States was attacked on 9/11, together we went into Afghanistan to deal with those who attacked us and to make sure that Afghanistan would not again become a haven for terrorists who might attack any of us. And together we have achieved the goals that we set out to achieve. And now it is time to bring our forces home. We will work very closely together in the weeks and months ahead on a safe, deliberate, and coordinated withdrawal of our forces from Afghanistan. But even as we do that, our commitment to Afghanistan, to its future, will remain.
Well, to get more on Antony Blinken's comments today in Brussels, let's bring in France 24's Dave Keating. Dave, what more can you tell us about the announcements today?
Well, NATO countries have been waiting for this decision from the Biden administration for some time because there's been a big question mark over whether the Biden administration would also commit to that May 1st deadline in that peace deal that Trump made with the Taliban. We now know that the U.S. will not meet that May 1st deadline. That announcement is expected to be made official today. The U.S. will instead set a withdrawal date of September 11th, obviously a very symbolic date. That, of course, was effectively the day this war began 20 years ago. Of course, the U.S. and its NATO allies invaded Afghanistan because the Taliban government there at the time would not hunt down and turn over Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. So this does give some clarity to NATO partners who were badly in need of clarity here. There's been some frustration here. Certainly over the past 4 years, there was major frustration with the Trump administration because they were not involving the NATO allies in this decision. Of course, it's historically a very big deal when a country makes peace arrangements with an adversary without consulting the allies with whom it entered that war in the first place. That is what Donald Trump did. So the Biden administration has been bending over backwards, coming here repeatedly to Brussels to say this is going to be a consultative decision and we will all go out together the way we came in, trying to make up for that faux pas, to put it mildly, by the Trump administration. And I heard from one official of a NATO country today that they see the September 11th date as being a good choice because it's symbolic of the end of the 9/11 era, an era that both people in the U.S. and Europeans would like to see the back of. It's an era when the U.S. was really focused on the war against terrorism. Above all else, it shifted geopolitical realities. It caused some kind of Cold War in some parts of the world, but now the U.S. is really shifting to focusing on traditional state adversaries like China and Russia. And of course, right now, we're very much in the COVID era. So the 9/11 era has been over for some years, and that pullout date on September 11th will be really symbolic. It'll make it official. The 9/11 era is over. Of course, the war itself, not many people would call a success, whatever Secretary Blinken said right there, because of course, we're probably going back to the exact same situation we started the war in, which is a Taliban government.
Dave, tell us a bit more about reaction there from NATO. Is everyone in the organization completely on board?
I think so. We've already seen a confirmation from the German defense minister that they will sync their pullout with the U.S. on that September 11th date. The Times newspaper in the UK is reporting that the UK will also sync their pullout from Afghanistan on September 11th. I think we will see a cascade of such announcements the rest of today. Effectively, it's really not possible for any NATO country to remain in Afghanistan without the U.S. there. They will like to see this as not just blindly following along the U.S. But of course, this was a collaborative effort. People do forget that. This was the first and only time Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, the Mutual Defense Clause, has ever been invoked. After 9/11, the U.S. essentially demanded that its NATO partners invade Afghanistan with it, and everyone did do it. I think people forget that because they get clouded with the Iraq War that Germany and France did not participate in, and therefore it was not, and still is not, a NATO mission. But they all did participate. For the past 20 years, they've been fighting side by side with the United States. And so they're really going to want to collaborate on this exit. They're going to want to make this seem as much of a mutual decision as possible. But frankly, when the subject of Afghanistan comes up in this town, it is not a subject people enjoy talking about. It's not a subject that engenders positive feelings toward the U.S., I can tell you that. So I think both sides are eager to put this war behind them so the Biden administration can focus on reinvigorating and repairing transatlantic ties, which of course started to fray under George W. Bush because of these two wars. And this will really allow turning the page, getting out of the 9/11 era, and hopefully moving on in the relationship between the EU and the US. Of course, the Biden administration and Europeans saying more time needs to be taken to do this carefully so that you can minimize the damage to the Afghan people, which will undoubtedly be damaged by this move. But they want to minimize that as much as possible, and that means taking some extra months to coordinate this pullout.
Dave, thanks for that. France 24's Dave Keating there reporting from Brussels. Now, Iran says it's set to increase its uranium enrichment to 60%, just 30% short of what it needs to build a nuclear weapon. That announcement comes 2 days after an explosion at a nuclear facility in Iran. Iran blaming Israel for the blast, saying it could hurt renewed negotiations over the broken nuclear deal that Donald Trump abandoned 3 years ago.
What you are seeing, our response to your malice, is replacing the damaged centrifuges with more advanced ones and ramping up the enrichment to 60% at the Natanz facility. You can't conspire against Iran and commit crimes in Natanz.
Joe Biden is asking Vladimir Putin to ease off on tensions between Russia and Ukraine. The two men spoke on the phone Tuesday, with Biden urging the Russian president to pull back the buildup of Russian troops on the border. The U.S. leader also invited Putin to meet in person for a face-to-face summit. Today actually marks 7 years to the day that Ukraine announced what it then called an anti-terrorist operation against Russian-controlled forces that had overtaken part of its territory. The war there has never really stopped since then. France 24's regional correspondent Gulliver Cragg visited the front line in Ukraine near the government-held port city of Mariupol.
7 years ago, volunteers rushed to help defend Ukraine. Some of them are still active on the front line and apprehensive.
Will there be an escalation? No one knows. Tensions rise, then it calms down, then again tenses up. We do have information, though, that the Russians are setting up field hospitals near the border with Ukraine, and that's a pretty serious sign.
Over the past couple of years, rising tensions have been accompanied by increased use of drones.
The other side are constantly flying drones and doing surveillance, though our teams deal with that quite well.
Oleg operates drones for the Ukrainian side. He takes us to see.
These things cost just over $1,000, but they get shot down a lot. We lose about one a month.
These commercially available drones can drop small explosives, but are mostly used for precision targeting and short-range surveillance. Oleg transfers all his footage to the army.
We're noticing a lot of movements of material at night, but mainly by the sound. They're not coming up close to the front line, so it's beyond my drone's range. Of course, maybe it's more about psychological pressure, all these movements.
If the inhabitants of Mariupol are feeling that psychological pressure, most don't want to show it.
Я думаю, никто на нас не нападет.
Это провокация, хочу вам сказать. Все будет хорошо.
Ukraine's leaders have also suggested Russia's troop movements may be a bluff. This local activist doubts that.
Can you imagine how much all this costs for Russia itself? A deployment on this scale is no simple matter.
Mariupol, the largest city in Donbass today controlled by Ukraine, is a strategic port. It was shelled in 2015, and according to what is for most people here the worst-case scenario, it could, again, be in Russia's sights.
Next, with 30% of its population already vaccinated, Serbia is emerging as a European vaccination champion. Just last week, the country launched a new program to now vaccinate the homeless. Laurent Rui has more on that campaign led by the Red Cross.
54-year-old Dragan has been homeless for a decade. He lives in a shelter in Belgrade and gets by on casual work. Today he's being vaccinated against COVID-19 thanks to city social services, the healthcare system and the Red Cross.
Materijalna situacija mi je teška, iza nas je zima bila, radim fizičke poslove. Moram da pohvalim Crveni krst jer sam obavio vakcinaciju čak bez dokumenata.
With 30% of the population already vaccinated, Serbia leads Europe in anti-COVID vaccination. Belgrade has launched a vaccination campaign for the homeless. The first group of 17 were given the jab last week.
Dolaze na drugu dozu, na zakazanu kako je prema vakcini koju je primio, pošto nema telefona kome možemo poslati SMS poruku.
In this Red Cross shelter, homeless people can eat, take showers and receive clean clothes. This is the ideal place for the Red Cross team to inform users about the different vaccines.
Mi I dalje nastavljamo da pozivamo naše korisnike da se vakcinišu I imamo I sada zainteresovane.
But many are still reluctant to be vaccinated. Dragan isn't one of them.
Odbojnost je proizašla iz neke propagande da ne valja ta vakcina, međutim, dok je nauka to pronašla, po meni valja.
A third of those using Red Cross services have shown interest in the vaccines. But not all homeless people come to the Red Cross. It's difficult to predict how long it will take to protect all of them against COVID-19.
Some sports news for you now, and there are a lot of happy football fans in Paris today. Their team, the Paris Saint-Germain, may have lost its match against Bayern Munich last night, but it still won a spot in the Champions League semi-final. The Paris team now just one step away from making it to its second only final in its 51-year history and could be on course to win the whole thing for the very first time. Valerie de Kemp reports.
Outside the Parc des Princes stadium, it was hard to believe that Paris Saint-Germain had just scored a major victory. On Tuesday night, fans were clearly outnumbered by police. Yet some still decided to defy COVID-19 restrictions to cheer the PSG.
C'est une forte mobilisation parce qu'on a quand même battu le Bayern, champion du monde, champion en titre de Ligue des Champions. Ça méritait une grande ovation, une giga ovation.
Bayern Munich scored the only goal of the game, but the Germans were unable to get the second goal they needed to qualify, allowing Paris Saint-Germain to reach the Champions League semi-final. The team's new coach, however, remained humble.
Hemos eliminado en octavos de final a Barcelona en dos partidos, en dos partidos. Hemos eliminado ahora a Bayern Múnich en dos partidos. Creo que merecidamente las dos eliminatorias. Y no creo que Paris Saint-Germain sea el favorito a ganar la Champions. Todavía quedan rivales. Cualquiera de los equipos que pasen a semifinales tendrá la misma chance de ganar, ¿no?
Before they can secure a place in the final, Paris Saint-Germain will have to face Manchester City or Borussia Dortmund. Despite a 1-0 defeat, Chelsea has also knocked Porto out of the competition. The Blues will then meet either Liverpool or Real Madrid.
Thanks so much for watching France 24. Stay with us. There is a lot more to come.